Hello, everyone. The monthly New Mexico Tribal Webinar Weather Outlook webinar series. My name is Helena Deswood, and I'm the Tribal Coordinator for the USDA Southwest Climate Hub. Before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that we're muted and the webinar is being recorded. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, let Leah or Victoria know, and they'll be monitoring the questions that are sent to the Q&A box. You can send your questions by text as well to Leah at 517-974-9383. So the monthly webinars will provide updates on current and upcoming weather and climate conditions in New Mexico. The webinar series was made possible by the following partners: the Santa Ana Pueblo Department of Natural Resources, the Quivira Coalition, the Southwest Climate Hub, New Mexico Climate Center, NOAA NIDIS National Integrated Drought Information System. The webinar will be shared with the attendees afterwards and will be available on the NIDIS and Quivira Coalition websites. I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Dave DuBois. He is a state climatologist for New Mexico, director of the New Mexico Climate Center, an associate college professor at New Mexico State University. He provides climate and climate change information and education to policymakers, agricultural community, industry, educators, students, and the public. In addition, he also gives numerous talks and holds workshops every year on topics covering climate, drought, air quality, and climate change. He also teaches and trains students at the New Mexico State University and maintains an active research program in air quality and climate. He also chairs the New Mexico Drought Monitoring Work Group. He is a native of New Mexico and has grown up on farms in southern New Jersey. Dave, thanks for being with us here today.
You bet. Let me get my timer set up here so I don't go 2 hours. Oops, my phone is doing funny things. And all right. So thank you for that introduction. Let's go on to our outlook. So last month we did an outlook status and look at the drought, and this is an update to that. So it's been pretty dry over most all of the region, and so here's a radar-based precipitation totals over the last 2 weeks as of this morning. As you can see, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but over on the eastern side of the state, we had a few little storms come up over the past few days, but not a lot of rain. Few areas, ½ inch to a couple pockets of 1 inch or so, but very, very localized. Nothing to say of in southern New Mexico or the southeast, very little at all. And we had some clouds about it in the Four Corners area. So it's been pretty dry over the last couple weeks. And so let's as we did last month, I want to look at some specific weather stations. We looked at last month, Cochiti. So here's the precipitation compared to the long-term average. So the green line. The green line is the actual precipitation, and starting at the water year, which is October 2019, and going to yesterday. The brownish line here is the long-term average. So if we're above that brown line, we're above average, or below that line, we're below average. So as you can see, we're about 7.5 inches for the water year, and compare that to last year's water year at this time, we had 9.35. So we're above average, but it's been pretty dry. Here's this flat line. We look at these and we can see this drying out since mid-April. We haven't had any precipitation. Let's move on to go south of there in Los Lunas. Same time period, water year. So we've got about 5.8 inches over the water year compared to about a little over 6 inches last year. So above average. But as you can see, you know, we've gotten a few little precip events, but not a lot. We basically had most of our precip occurred right around late November. That basically got us where we are today in terms of the total. But let's move on to let's go north all the way up to almost in the Colorado border, Dulce. This is where we're having problems. Very dry. As further you get north, the drier it is. So this is an example, like I mentioned earlier. If we're below this long-term average line, we're in the dryness. So we've got 6.83 inches as of yesterday. I didn't see anything out of there today. Compare that to last year, almost 15 inches. So we're at 62% of average. So you can see this. I mean, look at this last period. We know we've got just a little bit of rain, not really much to do anything. Not really anything since the late March. So it's pretty dry. So let's go over a little further west, over at the Farmington Ag Science Center, over on the Mesa. 3.26 inches over the water year, 7.38 last year. So we're way behind last year, as you can see that. And here's that same problem we're seeing, pretty much flat line since toward the end of March. So it's been really dry. It's just getting worse out there. So keep that in mind when we're looking at some of the other products and maps that I'm going to show you. So I just want to give a summary of the snow up in the mountains. So I'm going to do it by basin. I'm going to not tackle all the basins, but a few of the important ones. So the Rio Grande Basin. So here's the actual is this black line. So we, like I mentioned last month, it was looking really good early on in the water year, but then the storm sort of petered off, and we peaked early and we melted out early. So here's the long-term median is this green line. So, and we usually peak right around here. So we've pretty much melted out as of now, and you can see we've melted out weeks earlier than the average. Let's move on to the San Juan. It's also most of all of it's melted out. Same story. It was doing pretty well earlier in the water year, but then we peaked out a little bit early, and then of course we melted out early. It's been warm, and that's kind of the story you've been seeing over the past few years. Is that same thing? We not doing too bad, but we melt out early. Pecos, same story there. We were doing really well early on, but we pretty much melted all out. There's 3 stations up in the Pecos. Seeing that same pattern. Let's move on to the Chuska. That one's melted out. This one has a shorter period of record, meaning there's less data. So compared to the other basins, but compared to the 10 years or so of data that he had, it was above average for the whole season. This one, I mean, just because of that shorter period of record, we were actually exceeded the median there, so not too bad. All right, so let's look at going down in elevation from the mountains to the streams. So I just picked a few points along some of our rivers. So if you go in the upper left corner here, the Animas River at Farmington. So the little triangles here are the long-term average. That's in 96 years of data to put those averages together, and then the blue squiggly line, that's the actual discharge in cubic feet per second. So you can see we're right early on. This is the last 28 days, right about the average, and we sort of peaked out here, and then we're going below average here, so not too bad. If it goes in the bottom left, the San Juan, this is over at their Bluff, Utah. The long-term averages are up here above 3,000 to 4,000 cubic feet per second. We're down around 2,000, so we're below average for the San Juan. Upper right corner here at the Rio Grande at the Embudo. Here's that long-term average, dancing up there about 1,600, 1,700 CFS. We're down here less than 1,000, so we peaked out and much less than the average. If you go further south downstream on the river, here's the river at Rio Grande at Albuquerque. The long-term average, and this is 46 years of data, we should be between 2,000 and 3,000. We're at 3,000 as of yesterday. We're down to 500, 600 CFS. All right. So let's look at water year precipitation. Let's look at different basins. So looking at some of the ones, I'm not going to go in detail on. I just want to show you some examples here. Rio Chama, we're at 63, as well as the Upper Rio Grande Basin. Only basins that are doing really well are some of the smaller ones, San Francisco, Mimbres, and those are all melted out. But remember, this is the precipitation, total precipitation. So that includes the rain as well as snow. Animas at 75, San Juan headwaters at 63%, then going down to Zuni 87%. So some of these are below average. So we're gonna see that in some of the other later in Streamflow. So what's actually in our reservoirs? So this is as of a couple days ago. Elephant Butte, and it's on the Rio Grande. 21% full. We're full in irrigation right now. Caballo 35%. Over on the Pecos, Sumner 49, Brantley 49%, Avalon 63%. Let's move on to the Rio Chama. Further up north, there we've got the Heron Reservoir at 32% full, El Vado 57% full, and then further down on the Rio Chama, Abiquiu at 49%. So let's move on to San Juan, just one more basin. Some of these on the some of the larger reservoirs, Nighthorse 97, Vallecito 96, and of course Navajo 80% full. So let's kind of look at the impacts of the dryness. Well, it's very similar to last month's. You know, basically the bottom line here is if it's dry last month, it's worse this month. Pretty much the same areas, northern New Mexico, all the way, pretty much the whole northern tier from Union all the way to San Juan, and then going down south on the east side, all the way down Roosevelt to Lee County and going across into Otero County. Those pretty dry, and we're seeing some dryness on the East Mountains as well. So how's that translate to vegetation? Well, I showed this map last month, very similar. It's just getting worse. So this is the Vegetation Drought Response Index. We're seeing pretty much north of I-40. We're seeing most of the impacts. Although there are a few areas that are pretty much struggling with vegetation, getting some impacts on the range conditions, starting to look. I mean, it's been pretty bad, but most of the impacts are up north, and we're seeing that on the as well on the east side of the state. So on the Drought Monitor, but that's updated once a week. The latest one was updated this morning. So this is as of this week's. We've seen a drought, pretty much longer term drought up north, but we're starting to see the indicators push toward the south. So we've got D1. This area here, basically that's the change over this week. We've seen that go south, and then most all of the eastern side of the state is in that D0. So that's that abnormally dry, but it's still not looking good out there, particularly up north. That's our really main concern, and it's going into Colorado as well, and also into the plains, southern Great Plains as well. So we're basically we're looking at. Things are not looking good. So what's our outlook? So well, we take some of our cues from larger scale. So in a lot of this, we look at the oceanic temperatures, and one of the things we try to look at for later in the year is this Nino 3.4. Most all the year, last year it's been, even the year before, it's been mostly above average, the ocean temperatures, a few dips below, and we're just in the past few weeks, we've actually seen it cool off on this Nino 3.4 area. So what does that mean? So we've seen, this is a cross section of the Pacific Ocean, all the way from Papua New Guinea to the South America. So it goes depth. If you go down, this is deep. As you go deep in the ocean, about 50 meters, 100 meters, all the way to 450. So the surface is on top, and this is a time series over the last 13 weeks, and it's colored by the temperatures. So if it's blue, it's below average temperatures, and if it's red to orange, that's above average. So you can see this area here, this cool area, cool water actually moving. So here's starting here, it's moving toward the east. And these are sort of what we call Kelvin waves, and this one actually started off as they call downwelling Kelvin wave, and then we've started to see some upwelling Kelvin wave. It basically brings and pushes out some of the warm water, and then we're seeing as a response this cool water come up. So that's kind of what we're seeing now is a cooling of the Pacific, and then what we look at is the surface temperatures. So what our cue to look at toward the end of the season are these model. And we will look at the sea surface temperatures. Right now, we're right about here, and we're looking at if it's basically this is the Nino 3.4 temperatures. So if it's right along this black line, that's the neutral. So if it's below here, that's the La Nina territory, and if it's above that black line, that's the El Nino territory. So you can see we start off above, but the forecast is showing looks like it's going to dip below that black line into the La Nina or into the neutral line. So right now we're at neutral, but the forecast is likely going to show, and it's going to get updated at the end of this month into the early of next month. So it'll be interesting to see. This is the from early May, these probabilities, and I like to look at the early part of the month to see the probabilities. So we'll see it, maybe check in on early June to see where we go. So right now the gray is the probabilities for neutral, and the El Nino is the red, and blue is the La Ninas. So as you can see, we're basically at the end of the year, we're competing for both either a neutral or a La Nina. So that's the La Nina is a cooling. So we're seeing that, and usually that gets started. If we trigger a La Nina, seeing that kind of trigger it in the late summer. So we're going to wait and see about that, and that basically tells us what our winter is going to be like. So what about before that? So it's a little too early to say what the winter is going to be like right now, but El Nino is probably not very likely, but it's going to either stay neutral or a La Nina. So remember, La Ninas tend to have a lot more dry and warm. So that's kind of a heads up on that one. It's too early to say for sure, but that's one of the possibilities. So if we look at the forecast for the next 7 days, not a lot of precip. There's one system coming in bringing precip to the higher elevations, but not a lot of relief to the lower elevations. That's very unfortunate here. So let's look a little further on in the outlook. So for the next month, June, so on the left side is the temperature outlook. So basically this very similar story, above average temperatures over June, much high, high probability of that. On the right is the probabilities for precipitation. So this is EC, equal chances. So it could go either way. So there's not a lot of predictability in terms of looking at the precip over next month. There's not a lot of evidence from the oceanic drivers. However, if we go to the monsoon, similar story for the temperatures, even a higher probability, 70% probability of above average temperatures. So that's pretty for sure for that. But if you look over here on the right, that's our precipitation outlook for June, July, and August, basically our monsoon, which is, I really didn't want to see this. Basically is showing some probability popping up for below average precipitation for the northwest New Mexico, southwest Colorado, northeast Utah. So not a lot of good news there. Good news for the southeast, or maybe not so good up in the upper Midwest and the northern plain states, because they've had a lot of flooding. But for our area, not so good. unfortunately, I'm bringing that bad news. And so that basically, on my last slide here is to look at the drought outlook. This is updated on the 21st of this month. So all this chocolate color here, that's the drought persisting. And then this lighter tan color, that's drought development likely. So we're seeing that in the drought monitor. Whenever we saw that D1 pop in, so we're seeing that the drought expanding is not going to get any better, unfortunately. So I wish I had better news to give you all, but it's sort of a heads up for later in the year. If we don't get a good monsoon, it's just going to get worse. So it's kind of be prepared on that. So I wish I had better news, but here's if you have any questions, contact me. I read my email. I'm also on Twitter. Provide some information there. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to give the update. And I think we'll take some questions now.
All right, thank you so much, Dave, for that update.
You bet.
Looking into our chat box, I'm not seeing any questions. So I would like to ask Leah if she received any questions via text or email.
I have not received any questions in my email or text, but I have a question for Dave. Dave, can you talk about how this drought that's persisting or increasing in the north is going to affect the snowpack that's flowing down right now from the mountains?
Yeah, so right, I mean most all of the we've got runoff that's going on all the basins. So it's we've got high temperatures right now, so it's going to be of course impacting some of the stream flow. I imagine it's going to be not impacting a lot of the basins majorly, but I think it will have some impact on because I mean early on basically some of the impacts are if you have really dry soils to start off in the before the runoff, you're going to get a lot of infiltration. We had some precipitation earlier on in some of the basins. It fell more as rain as opposed to snow. So that sort of basically wetted the riverbeds, which is good, and I think that really helped out on some of the basins. I mean, there's basically not a lot of snow left right now. We're in full runoff mode. We're at the end of May, going into June. So I think it's mainly what's out there. There's going to be more evaporation, of course, when you get more higher temperatures. But I'm not that concerned with once you get it melted out of the snowpack. It goes in basically most of it, like Rio Grande, it goes into our reservoir systems, and then after that, it just goes. It's highly regulated. I'm more concerned with the range conditions at this point. There's a product called Grass Cast. And basically looking at the range conditions for the native grasses out there, and that was showing areas of a lot of concern, and mainly on the eastern side of the state. Even with even with the average monsoon, through the end of August, September, there could be still areas struggling to keep up the forage capacity. So, and I mean that's a whole nother discussion, but those are some of the heads up areas that I'm looking at right now. Sorry, I stumbled a little bit on that, but I was looking at some of my network is a little slow right now.
Oh, thank you. That was really helpful.
No problem. I get these notifications when my internet starts to get flaky.
And just so you know, we can still see your screen.
Okay. So any other questions?
Yeah, I was going to ask. So if anybody from the audience has any questions, you can send Leah a text or email, or you can also put your question into the chat box. Dave, as we wait, if there's any other questions, do you think you could please put up the second to the last slide? We have a few upcoming events and announcements that we would like to share on behalf of our partners. So the first event that we will be having is on our side of the Pueblo of Santa Ana. One of our staff from the Department of Natural Resources will be hosting an online event on wildlife conservation and habitat enhancement on Santa Ana Pueblo, and that will be on June 9th from 7 to 8 p.m. And you can find the registration online at that link. You can find that link on our Facebook page as well. The next announcement is the Drought Resources webinar series for ag producers in New Mexico, which will be occurring from June through July. For more information, please follow that link. And on behalf of the Quivira Coalition and Southwest Climate Hub, we are still planning to host a rangeland precipitation monitoring workshop at Santa Ana Pueblo. We are projecting to host that event in August, and we will be continuing to update that information on the Quivira Coalition website. So if you're interested, you can still register for that workshop and you'll be receiving updates as time passes. And our last announcement is the Drought Learning Network for New Mexico Tribes Working Group. So if you'd like to join that group as well, please contact Helena. Her email is on the presentation and also at the end.
And Victoria, it looks like we have some questions entered in the questions box.
Okay. Do you mind reading those questions? I'm having a hard time on my side.
Yeah, sure thing.
Yeah, Dave, thank you.
So first we have a question from Chambliss Lantana. What was last year's monsoon season like if you have that info? I know it was low, but I want to see if it was comparable.
For which, for this area? Or I didn't quite hear everything.
It doesn't specify an area, so maybe a more general overview about last year's monsoon season, if that's possible.
So yeah.
Oh wait, McKinley County. I see a new.
Okay, great. Yeah. So last year, I basically one word, if I was to say, is pretty dismal. We had a few areas that were above average in the kind of south central, but most of the state, it was really, I mean, it's always really spotty, but it pretty much extremely in the northwest as well as the east side of the state. We've had some late season tropical remnants that came through, dumped a bunch of rain in the late part of the monsoon. However, early on it was really dry. So that's kind of what we're seeing. We're struggling from a long-term dryness, and as I learn more about what goes on, I'm constantly learning about what the timing of when things green up, kind of the native grasses, and it varies from elevation as well as regionally. And it appears that a lot of areas that the timing was off. When it got the rain, it was sort of late, and so there a lot of what we're seeing is struggling now. Even all the way in 2020, we're seeing that we didn't really get that right precipitation at the right time from last year, 2019. So and that's kind of the information we really treasure in terms of getting that feedback from the field is what was the timing? How did the timing work out for your area in terms of the vegetation green up? Did you get it when you need it, and was it at a wrong time? And it seems to vary by county to county in a lot of places. So, but overall, yeah, it was really dry, and I'm really hoping that we're going to see some at least average monsoon but that map I showed, let me just go back there. You know, this really concerns me, this below average. Even if it was showing equal chances, that would be a little more a little better, but it's showing that there's a chance of below average in the Northwest. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, Chambliss, for the question. And I suggest, it sounds like you have a lot of cool information, so definitely following up with Dave after this.
Yeah, feel free to get in touch with me. Yeah.
Yeah. And then next we have a question from Crystal. When will we know more about what the models predict for winter precipitation?
Really good question. I couldn't find my crystal ball, so we have to rely on our models, and these are updated once a month. Early part of, let me go to this one. Early part of the month, every month, they have the Climate Prediction Center, IRI, they put together these probability forecasts, and this is the El Nino Southern Oscillation forecast. So early in the month, they do they get together and they look at all the models, and then they put together a consensus. And that one comes out probably by toward the end of the first week, second week of June. And so that basically is going to, and this is basically what I'm looking at, is going to looking at this this Kelvin wave and see how that impacts the models, to see what they're seeing. Is that basically this cooling is sort of a sign? It's just one of the variables for looking at and so we really have to have not only the sea surface temperatures at depth, but also a response from the atmosphere. Basically, we have got easterlies, and there's how that blows the warm or cool waters across, and then you have to have the atmosphere respond back with convection and things like that. So there's a lot that goes into it, but this is kind of our dashboard, and to make it simpler, to see how the models are showing, you know, how far cooling are we going to get. So, I mean, to kind of answer your question, the further along, the closer we get to it, the better. But I mean, it sort of gives us a sense right now that it's going to be either a neutral or a La Nina. And remember what those do. The La Ninas tend to be, not always, every La Nina and El Nino are different, but if we look at the past, La Ninas tend to be warmer and drier, especially further you get south, especially New Mexico, south, you know, sort of a dividing line. The southern half gets more impacts from dryness and warming compared to the north. But I mean, everyone's different, so we'll have to keep checking on it every month. But at least we're just trying to give you a heads up of what are the possibilities. So preparing for it, what if we get a really low snowpack, how's that going to impact your operations? And you know, that's kind of where we are right now, is wait and see, but the chances are here. We'll see how it goes.
Thank you, Dave, for that great and thorough response. We have another question here from Doug, and it's, how do the 96-year average stream flow amounts account for regulation through the reservoirs?
So let me go to some of the Streamflow. So I mean, look, some of the basins have some of them a very long period of record. So like the Embudo, 89 years. So I mean, these are all highly regulated rivers. So it all depends on the Rio Grande compact. So in terms of what reservoirs we can store. So, but we still get a sense of the dryness if we compare the long-term average with the current flow down the river. So we do have a lot of unregulated stream flow measurements from the USGS, and we use those for when we do drought monitoring. So we can rely on the combination of those, the unregulated stream flows as well as the regulated, and then total amounts of water in the reservoir. So we have to keep in context the regulated, the Rio Grande compact, as well as the deliveries on the Pecos. We can get a general gist on how much water and drought based off of that, but we put it all together and look at the impacts of the snow melt, the timing, and how much water is there. So right now I know the water in the Elephant Butte is more than we had in the past couple of years, but we basically got that from a really good snow melt from a year ago. So we're basically using up our water from that, but we'll wait and see what next winter is going to provide.
Great, thank you, Dave. And it looks like there's not another question, just a comment from David Simmerall that the latest NOAA NMME ensemble is showing even worse than CPC JJA forecast for New Mexico.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I did see that too, and I was like, ooh. Yeah, so it's kind of wait and see. I wish that I wanted to. I mean, there's plenty of bad news, but yeah, you're right. It did show more drying in that area, so it's a heads up. Be prepared. If that's going to impact you, I would start now in if it's range conditions, and that relays on to what's going to happen even next year, 2021. So think ahead.
Great, thank you so much. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to Dave after the webinar and down the line, and I'm going to pass it off to Victoria.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dave, and thank you to our partners and for everyone who has joined us online today. As always, as Leah has mentioned, please let us know if there are any additional topics you would like us to cover in a future webinar. Feel free to let us know in the chat box, and or you can send one of our organizers an email. Our emails are on the slide. And we hope this information was very useful and helpful for you to plan for your summer. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.